Ryan, what is the most important unspoken rule of CEDH?
Don't feed the fish, except when you have to feed the fish, except for that one time when you shouldn't feed the fish. And don't forget the other time when feeding the fish isn't as important as not feeding the fish, except for when you need to feed the fish. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Playing with Power podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things CEDH, EDH, and Magic the Gathering. I am your host, Ryan.
And I'm your host, Callahan, and today we are going to be talking about the unspoken rules of CEDH. These are the things that new CEDH players always have to learn the hard way when beginning their CEDH journey. But before we hop into everything, we're going to pay the bills. Ryan, take us away.
All right, so our merchandise is now available on our store. We have dice, coins, playmats, tokens, sleeves, and much more all available. Please go to playingwithpowermtg.com and help support the channel. You can also support us on Patreon. Patrons get access to our Discord, webcam, playdays, early access to videos, names and credits of our show, exclusive videos, merchandise, and the ability to even be on an episode. There are tiers for everyone, so go to patreon.com/playingwithpowermtg and help support the show as well.
And of course, every episode, we have a Patreon shout out. And on this episode, that is Zachary Pauly. Thank you, Zachary.
Thank you very much, Zachary. You are the best. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into our main topic today, and that is the unspoken rules of CEDH. So what are we saying when we say that? What we're basically meaning is that these are these kind of sometimes hard lessons that you learn when you transition from a more casual environment over to the more competitive / high power / CEDH environment. They're the things that you were like, man, I really wish somebody had told me that. It would have kind of springboarded me forward in either my learning journey to become a better player or just in a social contract kind of way of becoming a more well-rounded player in the CEDH scene.
Yeah, certainly. There's a lot of stuff that you have to learn. It's a very complicated format. And there's a lot of stuff that people will parrot at you or whatever that you might not even know what they mean. So, we're going to start off right at the top here, and that is paying your taxes.
Yeah, paying your taxes. So what do we mean by that? Paying your taxes.
Always make sure you have your W-2,
Yep.
your 1099, your 1098-T if you're in college. No.
Yeah, your 1099 NEC. I'm sure all the people over in non-American countries know exactly what we're talking about. So thank you all non-American listeners. We still love you. We love you because your taxes are not a burden like they are in the States. So they're not a huge burden. They don't take months to do and hundreds of dollars. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Anyway, what we mean by that is things that usually require taxation for a resource. This would be things like your Ristic studies and your Mystic Remoras. And you might be saying, well, no, duh, of course you're supposed to do that. You'd be surprised how often people just tend to ignore that in a casual environment. Somebody puts down a Ristic study, everybody groans, and then nobody pays for it. You're like, oh yeah, I'm going to cast this one spell. Go ahead and draw. Go ahead and draw. Go ahead and draw. And you then pass the turn with 3 open mana that you could have paid for Ristic for. That's 3 extra cards given to a player who's probably going to end up winning that game. So you have to, it really what it comes down to is it's a little bit more of a tighter resource management. Of course, we always say don't feed the fish, or always pay for your Ristic studies. Yeah, of course, everyone always says that in all forms of the environment. But what we're talking about here is that when you don't pay it in a CEDH environment, you really are doing yourself quite a disservice in this type of environment versus more of a casual environment. Because the person with a Ristic study in a casual environment might just be drawing a bunch of cards and then, dirtling around a little bit and then passing just because they put it in their blue deck. In CEDH, that doesn't happen really as much in CEDH.
Yeah, certainly. It's certainly something to remember is that whenever somebody has something like a Ristic study and you aren't paying for it, they will make you pay for it because the cards they're drawing probably straight gas.
Exactly. They're not, drawing their pet deck that really does their pet card that doesn't really do anything. They're drawing game winning spells or spells that will eventually let you win the game in very short order. So giving your opponents this type of resource advantage is very disadvantageous to yourself. And this also goes a little bit beyond that type of just Rhystic Study and Mystic Remorse. This actually also goes into other things that you might not consider off the top of your head. So obviously paying for Smothering Tithe, if you do happen to see mid-range and Staxy decks that use Smothering Tithe, if you can pay for it, it's good to pay for it. You'd be surprised how quickly that treasure becomes out of control in one turn rotation. Don't forget, when you draw a card with Smothering Tithe, you get to draw the card before you actually have to pay. So you can think about it. So if you drew a game-winning card and you're like, I don't really want to pay that too, you have the choice of just not paying it at that point. But you get to see the information before you make the choice to pay. So don't forget that.
Yeah, certainly. There's always you always have a chance to you always get a chance to give yourself more information before you make decisions. Always easy to remember that. And that's kind of something that I think you always need to take into account when you're going to this next card that we have on here. Ryan, you wrote a little something down here that's funny. I had never heard before. What is it?
It's called Don't Water the Flowers. And I want that to become a catchphrase because I'm a dweeb. I don't know why people don't say it more often. I think people say it more often. I'm almost positive I was not the one. I heard this somewhere. Don't water the flowers. What am I talking about? I'm talking about Carpet of Flowers. So basically, if you see somebody with a turn 1 Carpet of Flowers and you have a fetch land, try and crack for something that isn't an island if possible. And also delay your fetch land cracking until you absolutely need to do it. So don't crack it, go fetch an underground sea and pass the turn, because then somebody might put down a Carpet of Flowers and be able to get a free resource advantage off of you. So delay that cracking of your fetch if you can. And if you do see a Carpet of Flowers on the battlefield, try to avoid getting something with blue in its cost unless you absolutely have to. It doesn't take anything for them to all of a sudden get 2-3 free mana every single turn. That is a lot over the course of 3 turns that a lot of people don't think about. They're like, oh, well, it's just 1, no big deal. Oh, it's just 2, it's no big deal. You just gave them a free Soul Ring. You just gave them a free 2 mana of any one color, not just even colorless, and for nothing. They didn't have to do anything for it. They paid 1 into it to get that resource advantage.
Exactly. You really got to watch for it because it will get out of hand before you know it. And it is surprisingly flexible. A lot of people think that you got to use it on your first main. No, you can use it on either of your mains if that's relevant, Carpet of Flowers, sneakily powerful card, and people have played less and less of it as higher color blue decks have gotten more and more popular. And so therefore, there's a lot of times when there are maxed out on 2 islands at the table. Somebody has a breeding pool and a volcanic island in play, right? And that's the islands. But the difference in between 0 and 1 is huge. The difference in between 1 and 2 is huge. Be careful when you're fetching. Be careful when you are making your land decisions. Always be looking out for those Carpet of Flowers, because that does, like Ryan said, you can give people a free Soul Ring, except it makes colored mana. You can give people a free Mana Crypt, except it makes colored mana, right? It's just give them mana every single turn on one of their main phases. It can be pretty crazy. Be careful. Don't be watering those flowers. You'll pay for it.
Absolutely. And a lot of people have been less and less on Carpet of Flowers simply because the format is sped up. So they're like, well, it's over. The game can be over in 3 turns sometimes. Sure, a lot happens in those 3 turns, but that's the max of maybe 3 lands. And so Carpet of Flowers doesn't seem good. But once again, Carpet of Flowers is probably, for some reason, kind of being discounted in ways that the lower colored decks really still do leverage Carpet. They, like maybe 3 color and under, leverage Carpet of Flowers more than maybe the 4 and 5 color decks do. But it's still a very powerful card. And if you see it, or it's going to be coming, or at least the potential that it's coming, try to avoid needlessly watering those.
I can't with that. I can't with this terminology. I can't do it. I can't do it.
It's gonna be my
Don't
new, it's gonna
don't
be in
water
my
those
new.
flowers. Welcome to the newest Playing with Power video. Cal aggressively waters those flowers.
I'm gonna put it everywhere that sees carpet of flowers now. It's gonna be on
No,
my
please.
tagline on Discord. It's gonna be everywhere.
All right. Speaking of taglines that everybody knows and loves, we're gonna move on to our final little card here in paying your taxes. And technically, Ryan, this card does have a tax associated with it. Um, we're talking about Mystic Remora. If you're not familiar with Mystic Remora, especially if you're newer to CEDH, I'm sure you'll become familiar with it very soon. It's a single blue enchantment that whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, the controller of Mystic Remora draws a card unless whoever cast that spell pays 4 colorless mana. So technically there is a spell on this. There is a tax on Mystic Remora. But the tax of Mystic Remora is really incentivizing you to not play your spells. The very commonly used expression is don't feed the fish. Don't feed the fish means if one of your opponents has a Mystic Remora out there, maybe don't run out Mana Crypt into Arcane Signet, into Soul Ring, into Talisman of Dominance. Don't let your opponent just draw freely 5 cards without really thinking about it. Now, I will say, like many things with CDH, this one's a little more complicated than just don't do it, which is what a lot of people advocate for. Because if one of your opponents develops their board and you don't get a chance to, then you might still just be losing a lot of win percent by not developing your board to keep even with the rest of the table, even though one player is drawing 2 to 4 cards off of it, right? But if you see a Mystic Remora on the table, much like what Ryan said about Ristic Study, you got to be careful because, dang, they'll make you pay if you just let your opponent draw 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards over 2 turn cycles off of a single mana investment. Oh, if it's over 2 turn cycles, it's more than 1 mana investment thanks to cumulative upkeep. But got to be careful with the fish.
Yeah, and this one is a little bit more difficult because this isn't a heuristic study where you can just pay 1. You have to pay 4 to make sure that they don't draw a card, and it only costs 1 to put onto the battlefield. So obviously, if this comes down the first turn of the game, there's no way that you're going to pay for the tax on this. So like you said, the angle of approach is a little bit different. It's don't feed the fish, meaning don't cast spells needlessly into this. If you have a Jeweled Lotus in your hand, unless you are getting a turn 1 Crom so you can catch up to the Mystic Remora player, you probably should just jam it out and pass. Well, what if it gets wheeled away? Well, that's an inherent risk you take, but that also punishes the Mystic Remora player anyway. Unless it's a windfall, then you guys are all doing well, so it's great. But then you still have the ability to maybe be a little bit more conservative with how much card draw you are giving the Mystic Remora player. Yeah, maybe if you want to power out a Mana Crypt into an Arcane Signet, okay, that's giving them 2 cards. But if you're doing like you just said, Cal, which was like 3-4 spells and you puked out your hand, then you pass the turn with all your resources, well, you just gave that person a whole bunch more resources to work with as well. And the thing is that Mystic Remora is supposed to be self-balancing, even though it's totally not self-balancing. A lot of times it can be a Ancestral Recall on turn 1. It's really bad. But what they have to do to keep that around is they have to keep paying the cumulative upkeep. So every time that they're paying their cumulative upkeep, they're usually trading a little bit of their own development in making sure that card stays around. So it functions as a pseudo stacks piece as well as a card advantage engine. It's an amazing card that it's become synonymous with this format, but it's definitely difficult to play around. And sometimes, you really want to play your spells in Casual Commander, and that doesn't always translate 1-for-1 over into CDH.
There are definitely a lot of situations where if you don't feed the fish player can just kind of hit their land drops and keep their fish around and just, maybe they'll draw an extra card here, maybe they'll draw an extra card here. And it is a lot of mana investment, but if you can lock down a table with a fish, that's a pretty good place to be. Because then you're the first person who gets to pop off without a fish on the table if you're the one controlling the fish. So.
That's right. And that's another part of it too. There's definitely exceptions to this rule, and that's once again one of those unspoken rules is when to break these rules, which is a whole other episode in and of itself. We won't get into that right
When
now.
to break the unspoken rules. If you want to learn more about breaking the rules around the fish, our Playing with Power member Drake Sasser did recently write an article about that. You can find it. Just look that up.
On Commander's Herald.
Hashtag sponsored.
Hashtag sponsored. Hashtag thank you, Commander's Herald. You're the best.
Exactly.
But yeah, so there's a lot of nuance into it, and like I said, we were not going to have the time to get into all of it today. No wonder this format's so hard to get into. Hey, there's unspoken rules, and then there's unspoken times when you should break said rules. So congratulations, have fun.
It's just like, here's the level 1 rule, here's the level 2 rule, here's the level 3 rule, here's how to apply across all 3 levels,
and here's the exceptions to said rules at any given point in time, depending on what the board state. So much complexity, but I'm glad that we're putting this out for everyone. So hopefully they can do a little bit of springboarding and help them get caught up in some things where I had to learn a lot of these lessons the hard way. All right, so let's go into our next topic. So our next topic is all about mindset. And what do we mean by mindset? This is about the approach to how you play the game in translation from a casual environment over to a CEDH environment. And casual is a lot of fun. We all play it. That's where most CEDH players started was just casual Commander, and they found themselves eventually venturing into CEDH. And they had to learn a lot of things about the unspoken rules from a mindset perspective. We're going to go ahead and just kind of start off with the first one. And you have to have a come to win mindset when you first come into a CDH game. A lot of times people don't really have that when they first start. They're still kind of got that high power mindset. Yeah, I want to win. I want to do my cool thing, but if I kind of want to see you do your thing. I've got a spell in my hand that'll stop you, but I'm not going to do it. That's actually not the approach inside of CDH's mindset. You have a come to win mentality when you are starting to play CDH, and that isn't always obvious at times. There are caveats and exceptions to this rule depending on what it is, but really this is a 99% coverage type of thing. You really want to have this type of approach because people they'll get bothered if you don't have that type of mindset, because that's kind of one of the unspoken rules, like we said, of when you go to a CDH table, is that everyone has the exact same mindset of how they want the game to turn out.
Yeah, this reminds me a lot of the website that we've talked about in the past in our CEDH Codex episode, cedh.guide, which puts out a very succinct kind of description of the format, which says it's CDH is Commander, but it's spicy, and we're a metagame and a mindset where specifically players only make plays that help them win. Now that's kind of a hard distinction to make, obviously, but that does kind of fit right into this mindset that Ryan is talking about. When we're sitting down at a CDH table, very much of a shortcutted rule 0 conversation or a pregame conversation that is kind of implicitly had by talking about you're playing CDH is that we're all here to hang, we're all here to have some fun, but we're all here to compete. We're all here to try to win this game, and we're all going to make game actions that up our win percent. Hopefully. I'm also just bad, so I think I take plenty of game actions that lower my win percent, but I'm trying to win. I'm just bad at it.
The come to win mentality is still there, Cal. It's still there. Even though you don't win, it's still there. Big same.
Yeah, exactly. So I that's definitely almost, I would say, the number one unwritten rule about CEDH is that when we're sitting down at a CEDH table, we're all coming here, we're all trying to win the game. And if you're not on board with that, then maybe CEDH is not for you. It is kind of tough to say that because I want as many people as possible to play CEDH and enjoy it and whatnot. But if you're not able to kind of flip that switch in your head where you're saying, okay, I'm here to win, we're going to make gameplay actions to win, I'm not going to get really salty if somebody else wins in this way or whatnot. If you can't kind of flip that switch off, then maybe CEDH isn't for you. And I do know several people who have tried CEDH and they've said, oh, this is not for me. I get way too salty over game decisions that other people make. I get way too upset if I lose in such and such a way. I don't find this actual competitive mindset enjoyable, and I do want to just go back to playing normal EDH. That's fine. That's
Mhm.
okay. Because much like 60 card formats or whatever, where a lot of the basal idea is we're here for competition, which did send a lot of people to EDH because that's not quite the way they like to interact with Magic the Gathering. If you it can't really align yourself with this unspoken rule and realize that it's not for you, then of all these unspoken rules here, this is the one you kind of have to really learn and internalize to be able to enjoy and play CEDH, in my opinion.
Agreed. And it's not that this is not about fun and everyone's just sitting there all, staring down their noses at each other and no one's having a good time. We're all having a good time, just like in casual EDH. We're just doing it with insanely busted cards, and we're doing it with this, come to win mindset. And we still have fun doing it. And I agree with you. This isn't for everybody. That's okay. Just like you said, not all 60 card formats are for everybody. Some people don't even play 60 card formats at all. And that's all right. And just like with the same thing with CEDH, if it's not for you, that's perfectly okay. I believe everyone should try it, just like everyone should try 60 card if you've never done that. But I'm not saying that everyone should like it. I don't think that's a proper thing to say. Just like no one can tell me what I do and do not like, I'm not going to try to force that on other people. All right. So what's the next one about mindset? So the next one here is kind of alluding a little bit to what you said when you were talking about the come to win mentality and the mindset. And that is, it is not personal. We talked about how sometimes, people get salty at certain actions and stuff, is that none of these things are personal. One of the things that I like to talk about a lot is what I call game memory. And that's when somebody plays a game, they win that game. And then they start another game immediately. They're like, all right, let's go ahead and go. And then, first 2-3 turns, and all of a sudden everyone's attacking you. And you're like, why are you attacking me? I don't have the resources. It doesn't seem like there's a reason why you're attacking me. And then people will chime in and they'll say, oh, you won last game, so that's why I'm attacking you. Or you destroyed my thing. Or you didn't let me do my thing last time. You stopped it. So I'm attacking you this time, or I'm doing something to you this time. So it's basically saying it's not personal inside of CEDH. That's the mindset that you need to bring. If somebody destroys your smothering tithe before you get a single treasure, it's not because they don't like you. It's because they don't like smothering tithe. That's why it's the single biggest threat on the board at that particular moment. And they want to make sure that it's not around to eventually give you enough resources to be able to win that game. It's not personal. They don't attack you because they don't like what you're doing, or they don't like what your plays are or anything like that. They're attacking you because it's the logically best decision to make at that particular time. None of the plays in CEDH are personal. And sometimes when you come over from a casual play space to a more competitive play space, some of that stuff kind of bleeds over and they take it kind of personally. And I do believe that is some of what sours some people on CEDH, is that they're taking it personally, or they think it's personal. Oh, attack the new guy, or I was just doing my thing. I don't know what your problem is. Be like, well, this is CEDH. I know your thing is winning, so I'm going to try and stop that if possible.
Yeah, certainly. It's never personal. That's the thing. And if it is getting personal, see what I was kind of just talking about.
Yeah.
If you're personalizing these CEDH games a little bit, then maybe it's time to touch grass. I don't know. Is that the correct term, Ryan? Is that the right term?
I don't know. It's what all the hip kids are saying these days.
Touch grass. I don't know. But and it, I get it. I can have a little rivalry with someone from time to time. That's a little fun. It's a little cute.
Is. Yeah.
It's a little neat. But it's great if it does not impact your game to game experience. We're trying to be competitive here. All of these mindset things that we have kind of just lock together, actually, because the CEDH mindset is one that's like pretty cohesive. And it all just kind of does come down from the central tenet of wanting to win the game. So, and we're all acting in that way. So like, yeah, I could just attack Ryan because I don't like him. I do like Ryan, But
That's a
I don't
lie.
know.
That's a lie.
Ryan
Friendly
really
podcast banter.
Ryan really got me with a playing with power deadline earlier today. I forgot about, so I'm upset. So I'm gonna attack Ryan at our recording tonight that I was 15 minutes late to.
It's
And,
deserved. It's deserved.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna attack Ryan because I'm upset with him today.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, I could do that, but no, I should attack the Adnos player. Ryan's playing some trash deck that I'm not worried about. I should be attacking that.
Yeah. You don't have to worry about me. Don't worry about it.
No. I should be attacking the Adnos player because that's the correct thing to do, and that's really just the thing to keep in mind.
I agree. But I also think this is honestly one of those things that probably casual commander could take a cue or two from. It's not personal. And if you're making it personal, you should probably check that a little bit. Maybe clean that up because it's probably leading to some unfun games for other people. And commander's about fun. It's about having a good time. So is CEDH. It's about having a good time. The plays aren't personal in CEDH, and probably casual commander could maybe take a few steps to also make sure that things aren't personal. I know that we love to inject our personalities into this game in everything that we do, and that's great. But some of those things probably would do better overall for the health of your particular metagame or your particular local game if you maybe kept some personal plays out of it. So I think that's just transcending advice, in my opinion.
Yep, exactly. And related to it's not personal and coming to win, we have one more little mindset thing here, and that is we're trying not to make spite plays and we're trying not to king make. What did those two things mean? Of course, they're both a little bit more specialized terminology, so they probably both deserve some explanation. King making. King making is an action that a lot of people like to talk about. If you are king making, that means that you are taking gameplay actions that specifically stops one person from winning, that directly and knowingly enables another person to win the game. Now, this is a complicated topic. It is really hard to police, and people have tried to, and they have failed to, because it is a very gray area. It is a very area in that realm. So, there are people who would tell you that casting Pact of Negation when they think that you don't have the mana to pay for it on your turn is a king-making gesture, because you are losing the game in order to stop somebody else from winning. But you know what? No, it's fine. You can cast your Pact of Negation, go crazy. You're upping your win percent. You can draw a Dark Ritual off the top of your library. Maybe you have one in your hand. Your opponents don't know that, etc., etc. But king making is tough. Spite plays, very similar type of concept to actually what we were just talking about too. It's not personal. A spite play is game memory, taking an action against somebody just because you're spiteful towards them, countering their spell just because you feel like it, or they countered your spell, so you're really just going to get them back. That kind of stuff. Spite playing, not exactly viewed upon favorably, because, again, all just goes back to the top. We're coming to win.
Mm-hmm. There's so much nuance to this. This could be its own episode. In fact, it is its own episode. Check the podcast show notes for a link to the episode that we did a couple episodes ago about it. So kingmaking and spite plays is a very complex topic, and there is a lot of nuance to it. I agree with you 100%. And it's not enough that we're going to go into in this particular session. You can listen to that other podcast episode. But basically, I'm just going to kind of parrot what you said. Kingmaking is when you are saying, I'm basically gonna let that guy win because I don't want you to win, or I want to stop you, and that person has a known win in their hand. So you're like, well, you're king making that player if you stop me, and that's where the complication comes in. Because, well, aren't you just king making that person? Like, if you're like, well, I have the way to stop him in my hand. I'm king making one of you or the other person. And so, like I said, there's so much nuance to this, but what we're trying to say in a more in a more coming to CEDH mindset is don't make your king making more overt or obvious. When you get into these like in the weed situations like I just talked about, yes, they're going to be more difficult to make those types of decisions because some people are going to try to politic you. I would almost call it gaslight you into thinking that you're king making one or the other. And they're going to try and politic you into doing one thing or the other thing. And that's just not a conversation we can get that deep into this episode. But when we talk about king making in this context, in those unspoken rules, is you're saying, well, you did this and you did that. I want that person to win over there. And that's what king making is in maybe the context that we're talking about, at least a little bit more on the surface level. We know that it's a tip of the iceberg and it goes so much more deeply than what we're talking about here. But when you bring over a casual mindset that is almost like that group hug or everyone has fun kind of mindset, it's like, well, I really want to see that person do their thing. I haven't seen it yet and I'd love to see it. I think it'd be so much fun. That's not really something that we do at a CDH table. You have to play to your best ability. You have to play to win. It's not a personal thing. So you don't try and king make somebody by doing what you just said. And that goes into also to the spite play thing. Well, I know that you got the win, so I'm going to cast this pact negation. They call it spite pacting, actually, is what that is actually called. And it comes from spite plays. You're spitefully doing something, knowing that you'll lose the game just to make sure they'll lose the game. And that's kind of, if you want to encapsulate spite plays into one or two sentences, that's what it is. Losing the game to make sure someone else doesn't win. And that's not what you want to do because you want to have a come to win mindset. There's still a bunch of nuance. Like you said, someone could windfall me into this, that, or the other, and I could get what I need to be able to win on my upkeep. Sure. But with the information that you have revealed in your hand, I have yet to ever see a situation where that actually ever happened. If you have seen that happen, let us know in comments. Let us know where you actually saw somebody spite pact or something like that. They were about to lose the game, but somebody windfalled and then they got to cast Dark Ritual. I'd love to know when that had ever happened or if it's ever been recorded because I've yet to ever see it. And so we want to try to avoid this type of behavior whenever possible because it leads to a lot of feel bats at the table and it just makes everybody frustrated.
Exactly, Ryan. And moving on to our next category of unspoken rules in the CEDH, we have what to bring to the table. This one's a little more complicated or maybe a little more abstract than some of our last ones, but you have to be prepared to bring the right things to a CEDH table because, connecting it back, we're all coming to win. Now, what does that actually look like in practice? When we're talking about what to bring, we're talking about what deck you're bringing, right? And nothing is off the table. Referencing CEDH.guide again, the first bullet point in their kind of definition for CEDH, which I agree with, is that all strategies are accepted, but it does also say decks majorly affect the game as early as turn 1. And I think that is a hard but interesting distinction to make, and I think it applies very well towards guiding you in the right direction for CEDH decks. Yes, nothing is off the table. Bring whatever you want to a CEDH table, but it better be able to hold its own. You better be coming to win with it, or else you're going to be in a tough spot.
This one is tough. So everything is on the table. And the problem is there's a big asterisk around everything is nothing is off the table is what I should be saying. Because there are some certain strategies that can hold their own at a CDH table and or don't really belong at a CDH table. Or at least I challenge you out there to make a liar out of me. Let me see something where that actually does happen, because I think that would be fantastic. But not all strategies can really hold their own at a table or create problems at a CDH table. And so what do I mean specifically by this? I mean things like chaos decks. Chaos decks are really crazy in casual Commander. You get your stuff where things are exchanging control all the time. Things are flipping from your library all the time. And everything is just so random. And a lot of people don't like it. Usually the only person having fun at a table with a chaos deck is the chaos player. But that goes even further into a CDH table, because usually chaos decks have a really tough time winning, and it comes back to that play to win mindset. You have to come to win, and chaos decks don't have that mindset. Chaos decks have that come to cause chaos and see the fun that ensues from said chaos is what their mindset is. And so that creates a lot of, adversity at the table, because that's not the approach that everyone else is taking. So it's, if you will, almost not being in alignment with the rule zero conversation that CEDH implies. Another one is stacks without win cons. That does not mean stacks isn't welcome, because stacks is 100% welcome at a CEDH table, and we encourage it. Stacks without reasonable win cons, stacks without ways to close the game are not welcome, because this is, once again, goes into that come to win mindset. You need to be able to reasonably close out the game versus force people to concede. Is kind of what I'd say. Oh, I'm going to blow up everyone's lands every turn, and I'm gonna stacks out the board so no one can do anything. I'm going to stasis lock people and be like, all right, well, how do you win?
Yeah, let's go to time in the CEDH tournament and draw.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, how do you win? What do you win? Oh, well, I just make it so everyone concedes. No, that is not welcome at a CEDH table, because, once again, that isn't a come to win mindset. And I know that people are going to try and argue with me about that and stuff like that, but it's, like I said, it's a rule zero conversation that you have that says, I want to win, not I want to make you concede. There's differences here. And so not all strategies can really hold their own at a table. I would love to see people try it and see if they can make it work in a CEDH setting. I think that would be fantastic. Maybe not the stacks without win cons, but things like the chaos and stuff like that. Another one is group hug. Group hug is usually, I want somebody else to win, but I want to do my thing doing it. That's kind of what it is, and sometimes they win. Group hug doesn't really work in CEDH. That person just wins. The person next in turn order just wins, is really
exactly
what it is.
Yep, I totally agree, and that is kind of the tough thing. It can be hard to thread that needle of something you find interesting, or something you knew, or a new commander, or a different kind of strategy, and figuring out how can this actually impact the game. There are win conless stacks out there, win conless stacks decks out there, but there is a win con. They have like Kamal in the command zone that overruns your team of hate bears every turn, so you can deal 25 damage to your opponents every combat step. There are ways to win the game in these kind of archetypes, but at the end of the day, I think you kind of have to accept another unwritten rule of CDH is just that not everything is good enough. You can try your best to make something work. You can tune it in infinitely, but sometimes it's just not going to hang. Eventually, I kind of found that out with my Rashmi Eternity's Crafter CEDH deck, which was kind of my OG love. Once upon a time, when I started playing CEDH, right around the time that Rashmi released in 2016, 6 years ago, the deck was actually pretty good. Nearly 6 years ago. It was August 2016, but whatever. At the time it was pretty good. Card advantage in the command zone. You get to play all the best green stuff, all the best blue stuff, control the table, and a lot of the craziest, most powerful stuff in CEDH that you have to worry about now just didn't exist yet. So that you could very reasonably police the table with a control deck in 2 colors. And eventually that changed, once people had Timna in the command zone, Crom in the command zone, all that kind of stuff, just drawing more cards than you were when you were doing your thing, that, it just doesn't hang anymore. That made me sad, but I had to accept it and move on. And that's why I play other decks now. And that is kind of an unwritten rule of CDH. Not everything can hold their own. It can be tough, but it can be a tough lesson to learn, but you got to learn it.
I agree. And I think a lot of people who are veterans of CDH have stories similar to that. They have a pet card that actually got them into the entire format. Some people it's Paradox Engine. Some people it's Rashmi.
Some people it's Godo.
Yeah. And some strategies just don't hang. Some of them never been able to hang. And that was the thing. It evolves. And sometimes you find yourself in that really dire situation where you're like, it just doesn't cut it anymore. And we're not saying that you still can't play your love and you still can't play that, but you have to understand that when you're bringing that to a table, if you're not equipped to handle the current strategies, you're going to have to adapt, or you're going to have to understand that you're going to win. You're not going to lose. You're not going to win a lot of games against the current meta. And that's just the unfortunate reality of it. And that's how it is. There is one final thing I want to say is the win conless stacks. I think that one, I think it really honestly deserves to have its name changed. And the reason that they say that is because they say it's win conless, meaning that there is not one A plus B combo that just ends the game immediately, because CDH, it's almost defined by that, is A plus B equals win. And they say win conless stacks. Well, really what they should say is comboless stacks. That's really the better term for it. It's a little bit more clear, because you're still closing out the game in a reasonable way. And some people coming into the format saying, oh, win conless stacks, so that's just land destruction every turn, or that's just make everybody concede versus actually win the game. No, it's I'm using combat to win the game, and I'm not doing it with a combo. So I think it should start to be called comboless stacks versus win conless stacks.
I definitely agree. Ryan, there's one more thing on this. What is it?
It's the most important thing. CEDH, and this is an unspoken rule that I think there's also some people that really should, I wish they had known a little sooner. It's still about having fun. We are still playing Commander at the end of the day. Some people looking on the outside coming in, not knowing these unspoken rules, think that CEDH is for tryhards and pub stompers and sweaty people who don't like to have fun. And it could not be farther from the truth. We are still playing Commander. We're just playing with broken cards and doing it with a certain mindset. But that mindset does not exclude fun from the equation. It is still about having fun. So sometimes coming into CEDH, everyone's thinking that this is a tournament mindset or this is a tryhard mindset. This is not that. There's all kinds of times when I've messed up a line and lost a game, but there's no stakes. There's no tournaments on the line. I'm not winning trophies and money. It was like, oh, I messed up. Whoops. I'm bad at this game, blah, blah, blah. And we shuffle up and we play again. It's about having fun. It is still about that. It's still a core tenet of CEDH. I wish people put that into their taglines more. I wish people emphasize that more. It is still about having a good time. That is so important, and it has become an almost unspoken rule that is still part of CEDH. A lot of people don't even say that when they're talking about CEDH. We're still here to have fun.
Exactly, Ryan. And that is the kicker. I think CDH does kind of have this image from some people that we're all just a bunch of sweaty tryhards sitting around getting mad at each other for countering each other's spells, and we're winning on turn one, and we're just going hard and crazy and all that kind of stuff. But realistically, it's not really that. It can be a lot more chill than that. I do often like to tell people that, like, when I play CDH in any environment that isn't like recording for Playing with Power, when we do kind of take ourselves a little bit more seriously, I'm just hanging out at the game store. I'm just hanging out in the command zone. I'm drinking beer at the local game tavern while, the local gaming bar, while I'm just basically playing EDH with my friends. But it's just, we're at a higher power level. We're taking our game actions a little bit differently than we would otherwise. It's just a chill, fun experience where we happen to be approaching the game a little bit differently than like the average EDH player would, while playing it in the very much kind of the same hanging out with my friends, doing fun stuff kind of type of way. So often, even in tournaments, it can be a little bit more intense, obviously, because we're really there to win and there's some money on the line, and there's people there you might not know as well and stuff, but it still could be a heck of a lot of fun.
It is. And I think this is something that still could use a little bit of help in the community to bridge this gap a little bit more. There's a lot of outside looking in from both sides of the table that the fun can only be had on the casual side. And that's not true. The fun can definitely be had on both sides of the table. And when you kind of get that us versus them mentality and things, it can lead to a lot of problems. We're not you versus everyone else, or us versus them, or casual versus competitive. That's not the mindset you should bring. This unspoken rule should be a well-spoken rule, quite frankly. I think that's a big takeaway from this podcast, is that needs to be shouted from the mountaintops as high as and as loud as possible, because this is really what CEDH is about. It's about having a good time. You can play CEDH your whole life, never enter a single tournament. That's fine. That's not what this is. CEDH is not just some tournament format only and no one ever has fun. That's not what it is. And casual people spouting that CEDH isn't about fun need to stop doing that. CEDH players saying that, casual people are gatekeeping fun, thinking that it's the only way they can do that, should also stop doing that. We need to start coming together and realizing that these are just two different ways to have fun, and it's still a blast on either side of that table, no matter which play you're playing. Let's all just have a good time. Let's all try out the CEDH format if you haven't already. You can realize how fun it is. Hopefully these unspoken rules will help springboard you and avoid some feel-bad situations, especially if you're playing with some veteran players that kind of already have learned these lessons but kind of forgot to tell you, kind of thing. And just have a good time. That's really what it's about at the end of the day. And we hope you give it a shot.
I very much agree, Ryan. And that is all that we have for the Playing with Power podcast today. Thank you very much for listening. And, as you were listening to this episode, did you think of any other unspoken rules that you learned at the CEDH table? Was there something we missed? Let us know in the comments below. Let us know in the feedback section on Spotify. That's a new thing that you can do now. Let us know how we did. And of course, while you're already on Spotify or what have you, make sure you give us a review there or on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast aggregator. You'd be surprised how much it helps. Those are really important for the recommendation algorithm or whatever for other people who listen to EDH and Magic the Gathering podcasts. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and more. All links are in the episode notes below. That about wraps it up for this episode of the podcast. Tune in next time when we talk more about our favorite format and our favorite game, Magic the Gathering. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye-bye now.